Hey guys, welcome to our video tutorial for the Final Cut Pro collection. This is an all-round comprehensive run-through of the plugin, so you can see why thousands of Final Cut editors are using it on a daily basis to improve the production quality of their videos and also save themselves a ton of time. Now, we are going to go into quite a lot of detail, so if you are looking for specifics on a particular feature, be sure to check out the time codes. I'll pin them at the top of the comments. I'll also be posting the link to the item page in the description so you can see more examples and download for yourself. On that page you'll also find a link to download the sample pack for free so you can try it out and see if it's for you. So inside of Final Cut Pro, what you will find is that the project is broken up into 4 main folder categories. If you locate your titles browser, you'll find 3 of them. The FCP titles collection, which houses all of your titles from minimal down to the various Stomp titles. Importantly, for all categories, you also have the handy search function. So if you have a particular title you use a lot, you can just search for it. For example, I use Corp 13 quite a lot as a call to action at the end of some of my videos. So I can just click on the search bar and then type in Corp 13 and the title will appear right away. You can also preview every element in the collection by hovering over with your mouse back and forward. Okay, then we have the FCP icons collection, housing our entire library of 550 icons in 18 different categories. We also have a separate video previewing every one of those icons, so if you are curious to see what's all in that library, I recommend having a look at this video. Then there is the FCP graphics collection, and in here what you'll find is all of the logo stings, the typography scenes, all of your backgrounds, all the social media elements, your infographics, device mockups, and then all of the shape accents. Those are all housed in the FCP graphics collection folder. The last category is the transitions collection, which is housed in the transition browser, and you can find that by clicking on this icon over here. It also has its own search bar, as you can see right below the browser. So we're going to start with the FCP titles collection and then work our way through. To begin, I'm going to bring Min44 into the timeline by clicking and dragging. Alright, so there's our first title, and what you'll notice if I pause it is that you've got the on-screen controls. Now this will allow you to select the middle cursor to just move it around the screen and the outer ring to scale up and down. Now if you don't want the on-screen controls on, you can see sometimes it is a bit distracting. You can turn them off by deselecting the OSC controls in your Publish Parameters panel. Be sure to bring those up by hitting the titles Publish Parameters. So from there, what we're going to do is just to zoom in here, and you'll see originally our title is on screen for 3 seconds and 14 split seconds, but you have the power to decide how long you want it to be on screen for. So let's say that you wanted this to be an introduction to a course, but the title is just a little too short. All you need to do is select the title in your timeline, click and drag it to your desired length. So now we've got a title that starts at 0 seconds and finishes at 10 seconds. And you'll see that it remains on screen for the entirety there. Now you also have control to turn the build in and build out animation on and off. All you need to do is go back to the Publish Parameter panel and select or deselect where you want that animation to be on and off. So now you can see that we've got the animation at the beginning off, but the build out is still ticked and animates out at the end there. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep them on, and I'm also going to shorten it to about 5 seconds here in my, let's go to 5 seconds. So I'm just going to move along in the timeline, find the right point, then click and drag it to get it there. And then the next 2 controls are your position and scale. So if you don't want to use your on-screen controls, you also have the ability to do so in the Publish Parameter panel. Then our next control is to change the rectangle color. So if we don't want to use green, if we want to match it up to the blue that our brand is using, we can do that by either selecting it here using the color panels, or selecting the RGB values, or finding your hex code and just filling it over here. You also have a couple other color panel settings if you want to find it using the color wheel, for example. Then we have a couple of different settings that pertain to the particular title. Obviously, each title is different. Some of them have rectangles, some of them just have text, some of them have, you see over here, there's just a point. So this one in particular has a rectangle stroke width. So we can either make that more narrow or make it a bit more bulky. And here's where we will change our text. And as you can see already, we have controls not only to change the text, but also the font size, color, as well as the anchor point. So first of all, let's say that we are going to be doing a calculus course. Let's call it Calculus 101. 101. Now you'll see that it's a bit off there. So what you can do is just use the anchor point to shift it back into the middle. But I'm also going to change the font. I'm going to use a bit more of a, well, let's actually use Montserrat. So there's my font. I like the italic on that. I'm going to make it slightly bigger. So I'll move it back into place. And then the font or the color, I'm going to change it to here is more of a red. And I want to use that color for both of the titles. So a useful hint is that you can actually click and drag your colors onto each other so that they repeat. I'm going to keep this text the same and introduction, but I'm also going to change this to Montserrat. So I'll just click MO to bring up the font, and I'll make this a light font. I'll also make the size a bit smaller and then reposition the text over here. Now that first text is a little bit big, so let me go and readjust that so that there's a little bit of a space on either side of the text. So that's looking pretty good. Now we have got two more options that come with all of the titles. That is the gradient overlay. Let's say that you don't just want to have a color on each of them, but you want there to be a gradient. You'll just tick on the gradient overlay. And as you can see, you've got two color pickers here. So the one color starts here and the second color ends here. So if we want to change that purple to be more of a yellow, you'll see that it's reflected here in our viewer. Then the last control is the drop shadow, and you see you've got 5 controls here. Let's just raise the opacity so that it's visible on screen. So now it's currently at 50%. We can blur that a little bit stronger than what it currently is just to make it more apparent. And we can also make the distance longer or shorter. I'm going to make it a little bit shorter here. And then finally, you'll see that there's also the option to change the angle. And because we are already using a blue, let's change that to something a little different to what we've already been using. So let's use a red. And there we go. That's the basic settings for most of the titles. So that's a pretty cool little intro that we've created there in probably just under a few minutes long. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is test out some drop zones. As you can see with the logo titles, there are quite a few of, or all of them in fact, use drop zones. So I'm going to bring in logo title 2, and then I'll just scroll over to a resting point. Now what I'm going to do is to import my logo. So I'll go File, Import Media, and then I'm going to find my logo. Here it is over here. I'll just use sample logo and then I'll import it. So now I'm going to make sure that my title is selected and then go into the publish parameters, and over here you can see that we've got drop zone. And now if I hover over this button, what you'll see is that it says click image well to select the source clip. So I'm going to click on that, and now that it's highlighted, you can see that it's asking me to choose a clip that has the drop zone I want to use. So I'm going to click on my sample logo, and then I'm going to click apply clip. So there's my logo, and you'll notice it's a bit small. So I'm just going to scale it up by clicking and dragging the scale button. And then above the drop zone, what you'll notice is that I also have a check mark for transparency. So right now it's checked to be on, but if I check that off, what you'll notice is that the colors of the original logo pop through there. Also notice on this particular title, because it's got text over a block, is that I can choose to use a text mask here. So you can choose to mask both the text and the logo out of these blocks. And each block in this title has their own gradient controls. So if we want to choose a gradient on the left block, we can do so, and as such we can also do it on the right hand side. Otherwise, the rest of the controls are much the same as the Min 44 title we just used. Alright, so I've just imported an image and I'm going to bring it into the timeline like this. And then I'll just hit Command minus just to zoom out slightly. And now we're going to take a look at using a call out. So I've got, let's say that we are running a fashion brand and we want to advertise the coat that, or the jacket that this man's wearing over here. What we can do is bring in this call out, and I'm just going to fit it to the same length as the footage. and you can already see that it's quite big on screen. So what I'm going to do is take you can see there's a few on-screen controls. Here's the main one that we've already grown familiar with, and then there's also this smaller one over here. But what I want to start to do first is just to make it smaller overall, then drag it over here, and then to put it on top of the jacket. Now straight away what you're going to notice is that our line stroke is clashing over here with the blown out white of the sunset. So what I'm going to do is to find, here's the line color, I'll click on that, and then I'm going to find another color. The blue pops a lot better here, and then also put that onto the pointer. So I'll just click and drag. Then I want to change the line stroke width, so I'll just make it a little bit bigger. And then currently the back plate is set to a gradient, and I quite like the look of that, so we'll keep it like that. But we'll go also between our blue and our turquoise. Unfortunately, you'll see there I've checked the color. What we should be selecting is the gradient 1 and gradient 2 color settings. So I'll just pop that over to the next one. And then for the second color, I'm going to find that turquoise that I'm after. Maybe a bit brighter. Here we go. Okay, so let's give this jacket a name. Over here's his name, so we're going to just delete that. We're going to call this the blunt jacket. And now what you can notice is that our back plate is not quite as long as it needs to be. So we can find the back plate width, back plate 1 width. Just extend this out as far as it needs to be. And then in the second category, I'm going to change architect to be the price. So let's say that this is a $199 jacket. And I want to keep the same color, so let's get this gradient color to pin over there. But I think that the font needs to be a lot bolder, maybe also just slightly bigger. I'll just move that up a little bit. And then we can also make the second backplate width a little bit shorter. Alright, so let's play that back and see what we've got. Perfect. Now what you also have the ability to do is to change the pointers. If we go back up to the pointer controls, you'll see over here there's a drop down menu, so we can have an arrow. It's a little bit the wrong way, so what we can do is rotate that, and let me just play that back so you can have a look. So that's quite nice. Then you also have a cross, you have cubes, and you can also just choose none. If you kind of just want to use the line, you're also able to do that. Alright, so I'm going to just quickly delete all of that, and now we're going to look at some of these stomp titles. So I'm just going to grab in a couple of these, and then we'll start making our edits. So we've chosen and think. I'll also put just imagine in here. Put in most wanted. And finally, I'll throw in find out more, one of the find out mores as a call to action. So let's just play that back and see what we have. Alright, but we've got 4 titles here, and they also sort of vary in terms of their pace. So we're going to make that fit according to our speed that we want for it. But first what we need to do is come up with some copy. So for and think, what I'm going to do is to change that to welcome to. And then just imagine I'm going to change that to the future. For most wanted, I'm going to change that to of video. And then for find out more, I'm actually going to use that as my call to action, so we'll just keep that exactly the same. So here we go. This is what it looks like so far. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to adapt the space between the future. So I'm going to go to cut position 1 and 2 and just move those closer inwards. So now that's sort of a lot more realistic as a space in between. So now we've got welcome to, and what I'm going to first do is to shorten welcome to so that it cuts more or less around about there. And to do that, I'll select the clip, right click, and go with new compound clip. I'm just going to call that clip 1. And then I'm going to hit Command plus just to zoom in here. And I'm going to move this right in like that. So now let's see that come back. Yeah, that's a lot quicker and that's a lot better or suited for what we want to do. Just like that, we're going to do it with the future. So I'll select that, click new compound clip. I'll name that one clip 2. And let's see, we want it to stop right about there. Maybe a little longer than that. So right about there is perhaps better. Yeah, that's not bad. Now of the future, or rather our video, what I want is probably for it to start over there. So I'm going to select this one, right click, new compound clip. I'll call that clip 3 and then cut it to this point. Yeah, that's a bit better. And there we go. I think the rest of the timing looks pretty fine. So I'm going to leave it at that. But what I am going to do is go into the graphics collection and just bring in a background to go underneath it, so that over here it's not just an alpha, there's something behind it. So I'll go up here, find the backgrounds, and I'll find something a little bit subtle. So let's go with space-bars. I'm going to just click and drag it underneath, and you'll notice that the colors clash completely, but that's fine, because what I'm going to do is to change it to a much darker color and then change the other color as well. So that looks nice, and we can also maybe make the drop shadow just maybe a bit harder, blur it out a bit more as well. So let's see what we've got. Alright, cool. The only problem, of course, is that our background is a little too long. Now, there's two ways you can do this. The first of which is you could obviously stretch this in, but what you're going to notice is that it's going to speed up the background, and it's very quick. Now, you might not want that, and that's completely fine. So let's hit Command Z to undo. And just like with the Stomp Titles, I'll right-click and select New Compound Clip. And I'm going to call this one Stomp BG. So now what I can do is just click and drag that all the way in, and now we've got our finished segment. So that's it for the FCP titles collection. Let's get all of that off our screens, and we're going to jump into the FCP icons collection. So as I mentioned, we have 550 different icons, and the icon catalog video actually previews every single one of these. So let's just drag in music just to play around and see what we've got. Just like before, we have those on-screen controls. And the very cool thing with the icons collection is that these are all vector icons. So you can actually scale this up as much as you want, and you'll notice you're still getting completely crisp graphics on your screen. So if you were producing a 4K or even an 8K video, you'll have no problem scaling up these icons. They will always be sure to be crispy clean on your screen. Okay, so that's the on-screen controls. You know about the build in, build out. Let's go through a couple of the more useful features of the icons. So first one is the fact that you have variants of different outros to choose from. So if we just go to the end here, you'll notice that we've got a nice pop out and in, which acts quite quickly. Let's cycle through them. I believe that this one is just a subtle, slow scale down. Then we have a pan down. I believe outro animation 4 is probably going to be a pan up. Then we have a... Oh, so this is just a flip, and you'll obviously see it better if I have something right after. So I'm just going to paste another version of it. So you'll see that it disappears just like that. So I'll delete this one. And then the last outro is just an opacity. So the opacity will just drop like that. I'm going to switch it to outro animation 1 just because that's my favorite. Here you'll see you've got the icon style setting. So within the outer ring, we have the ability to scale the icon inside of it up and down. Now you'll also have the ability to choose if you want 2 colors or 1 color or no color. So you can say, no, I don't want full color 2, or no, I don't want full color 1, or I don't actually want either of them. Let's just keep it on screen for now because I want to show you that you also have the ability to change the colors over here. Let's say we wanted some different look. We can do that. Then you also have the ability to change the stroke weight. So you can have it as big as you want. Obviously it's going to get chunky and you're not even going to realize that that's a music icon, but you can go as large as that. Otherwise you can actually turn it off altogether. But I'm going to keep it on maybe at 15. And the next thing I'm going to do is to turn off the full colors because I'm going to turn on the gradient. And you'll see now that it actually gives you total control to create a completely unique icon pertaining to your particular visual style you'll be using. So I'm going to change the color over there, and also this blue can change to maybe an orange, kind of like that. Over here you'll see you've got your sphere style setting, so you can turn the circle on and off if you want. You can also change the curvature on that outer ring. So if you want to have more of a rounded rectangle, you can do that. Then you've got the full color for the circle, so we can actually make that a completely darker look for it. That kind of looks nice. And then you can change the outer stroke width. I kind of like the red though, so maybe we'll just go for a brighter version of it. Then you can change the stroke width, you can bump it up or scale it down. And then you can change the full color of this background here to be a gradient. So here it's a bit bright, so I'm going to bump that down to a more darker color. And then the blue doesn't need to be quite as bright, so let's bring that back a bit. And then the last setting is probably one of my favorite settings, and for this one I'm actually going to show it to you with a brighter background. Let's just go like this. Is the drop shadow. So currently it's set to none, but you have the option of choosing slight or long. So let's choose slight. You can see that's popped up nicely over there. And then you can first of all change the color of it. I'm just going to keep it at black. And then you can also bring up the opacity. So you can see that there's the slight color, and then there's also the long shadow. So let's play that back and take a look at what it looks like. Alright guys, that's the icons collection. I hope you enjoyed playing around with these as much as it was a pleasure to build them. Let's head on into the FCP graphics collection now. Okay, so onto the logos things, and I am going to test out using logo 14 for this. And I'm also going to bring in the sound effects. So let me just make this a bit smaller and then bring in our folder over here. And you'll see that we've got the logo sting sound effects. So you just need to go into that folder and then bring in 14.wave, which matches up with the logo sting. Unfortunately, Motion doesn't support audio from Motion to Final Cut Pro, but it doesn't matter. You'll see if I drag that in, and straight away the sound matches up with the logo very nicely. So let's click on logo 14 and go into its controls. You'll see it's got the on-screen controls here as well. You can see you can move it around and then it'll sort of appear where you need it to. I'm just going to keep it to the center. I'll also just turn off the on-screen controls. We won't be needing that. And then we've got some color controls. So we've got the purple over there. We can change it to this green. Then the second color, I assume, is that background, so we can change that to blue. Then the accent color, that'll be these colors over here. Let's make that a nice dark color. So we'll get that to be black. Background, we can change that to a couple things. So you'll see that you have the option of choosing a background, or rather I should mention a drop zone. So if you want to use your own image here, you can. Let me just show you what that looks like. I'll just select it and apply the clip. Then you also have the ability to function on and off that movement. You can see over here is a clickable control. So now that's with the movement off. Otherwise, you can change it to a gradient or just select none. If you want to put your footage underneath, you also can do that. Let's switch it to a solid. I kind of like this pink color underneath, so we'll just leave it at that. And then you also have the drop shadow. I'm not going to mess around with that. We've already tested that on the titles. Then we can go into the logo. So the first thing I'm going to do is just switch this from sample logo to drop zone, and then we'll select the drop zone and we'll find our logo. We'll just use the same logo here, and then I'll click apply clip. And like before, what we'll do is just to scale that logo up. I'll just use box scale so that it's fitting in quite nicely. You can also change the position if you want, but it's not really necessary here. What I am going to do, you can see it's actually cutting off over here. So I'm going to actually pull it in on the box scale and then increase on the overall scale. As I mentioned, I want to change that second color because the blues are clashing over there. So let's mess around and see what we've got. That orange looks nice, but now the green looks a bit weird. So maybe I'll change it to a yellow. Then I'm going to copy this hex code because I think I'm going to match it up with the text color at the bottom. So I'll just go in here and then paste that and then hit enter, and there the text changes. And let's say that I actually want to use Bebas as a font instead. Then we can just choose Bebas Kai and our logo sting is ready to go. All right. Okay, so 25 logo stings to choose from, all that have their own sound effects. Let's move into the typography scenes. So I'm going to choose, let's use this one, Samuel James Brand Strategist. So let's bring it on screen here. I'll just play through. In fact, what I'm going to do is just put it above here so you'll see that it'll just go right over the logo sting. And now I'm going to bring in an image to appear on the right hand side. So I'll go File, Import Media, and I'll just use this picture. I'll say Import Selected. Now first let's go find our drop zone. I'll click on it and then I'll choose this picture and then apply clip. Then here I'm going to use the box scale just to move it in there, and then maybe position it over off to the right hand side. That looks kind of nice. Then we can change, you can see the blacks are staying on black. I'll just change the whites over to a different color, maybe turquoise. That actually looks pretty nice. Make it a blue. Okay, and then we have a whole load of different controls here. You can turn off whichever icons you want and then also move them around. So let's say, for example, she only wants to use her Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram icons. So we'll just turn off the YouTube icon. Then I'm just going to shift down the Instagram as well as the Twitter and then also the Facebook icons. Okay, cool. Then we can go into the background. If you don't want that on, you can turn it off. You'll see over here that that'll just appear sort of like that. But obviously the footage ends here. We can just drag that out if we want to. But that looks a bit weird, so we'll leave the background on. Here you have your line controls. These are these lines over here. You can change the opacity down if you wanted to, or you can scale up the line stroke weight. You can change these icon colors. So let's say that we wanted it to be more of a red, and then I'm going to just drag and drop these onto the rest of them so they're all the same color. Then you have all of your text controls, but we've already gone through those. So we'll just leave it as is, but actually it's already looking pretty nicely. And all of these typography scenes all have their very basic, easy to use controls. All right, so let's select all of this and delete it, because now we're going to have a look at the backgrounds. And again, these actually get a little bit simpler, because really all you're going to be doing is mixing with the colors. Some of them have a few different parameters, as you see over here. We can change the rotation for this. We can also just change the line width. So we're giving it just a little bit of a different style over there. Here you can change if you want a color to a gradient. I'll switch that to a color, and then the second gradient, I'm actually going to change this to a green. Change that one, and then I'll make this one slightly brighter. And then you have your drop shadow controls. So here, let's make that a bit whiter. And as we tried with the Stomp Titles, you'll remember that if you stretch this out, that's only going to make the background a bit slower. But if you want it to be shorter without changing the speed, then you can just create a compound clip. I'll just call this one BG, and then I'll just cut it in, and there we've got the same pace going the whole time. We'll try out another background just to see a couple of the other settings. So maybe with hearts we can bring that up. Here, let's play that through. You can see that it just has a bunch of rotating hearts. So for this one, you can change the size if you want it to be larger or smaller. You can change the direction. You can see that now it's rotating, or it's rather moving to the left. You can also do that moving to the right, but we are just going to have it set to none. Then you have the color of the shape, so we can make it blue if we want. Unfortunately, you're not going to really see it, but if we make it a nice dark color, you will, especially if we bump the blur up like that. It looks quite nice. Then what you can do is actually change the amount that's on screen. So we can actually go 14 by 14, and so now they're a lot more sort of out of place, and then you can maybe make them smaller or bigger according to your wishes. Alright, so we're going to leave the hearts on screen now, because I want to play around with one or two of the social media tools. So let's bring up Instagram post 2. So there we go, and what we're going to need is to import some more media. So the first drop zone what I'm going to use is that picture that we had previously. So let's go and use this over here, apply clip. So there's our first image. Then I'm going to bring in another image. So let's use this one. I'll click import selected. Then I'll go down to the second drop zone and click on that. And because we've got these hearts behind it, what it would be nice is to separate it a bit. So I'm just going to go to the bottom and just make that drop zone a lot more obvious. Maybe blur it out a bit more. Maybe try a little bit of distance, but then I also want it to be facing right down at the bottom, so it appears that it's facing upwards. So let's get that shadow right underneath it, just like that. Okay, and then we have all our text controls, which I'm not going to change, but what I want to show you is that you actually have an option to turn on and off the like button being clicked. So as you can see right now, that like button gets clicked, but you can turn that off as well. So now we have an option to choose between keeping it at stroke, so you'll see that that just looks like that, and you also have the control to keep it at full. So total control according to the visual style that you're going for. A bit more on that visual style though, you also have a couple other different controls. So you can make your panel rounder. you can change the color. So I'm going to turn this off original color, and now we can either set it to be a color or a gradient. If you want to, it kind of looks nice as a color with that nice blue, because then what I can do is go find the text and then make that white. And then, like we've done on a few of the previous examples, let's just drag that color onto the other text to make it pop out more. And now we just need to find the icons, because that also has a color. First of all, we've got the dots over here, so let me just drag that on the dots. Those are the dots over here. Then the other icons color, those will be down at the bottom. And there, that's actually kind of cool, a completely different look to the title. Go back into titles, see what other social media titles we have. LinkedIn icons, that's quite straightforward. Here we'll just show you, I'll just bring it up and make it scale a bit bigger. What's cool about this one is that you can choose which one of these icons we want to maximize. So you can see the drop down over here. Let's say what we actually want to do is enlarge love. So now what it'll do is just play back like that. Very nice. Then you have, let's use one of the profiles. So let's use profile 3. So you can see that currently it's set to YouTube. And the cool thing about these is that we have given you a whole lot of controls depending on which social media you want to use. So let me just turn off on-screen controls. You'll see here, if I drop this down, let's say that you were building a profile for your Facebook page. If you click that, then the colors will change appropriately. And that goes for all of these. So say, for example, if I bring in, let's bring a more obvious one like profile 1. So you'll see that currently it's set to Snapchat. It's got the yellow on black. You can also change that to any of the other brand colors and it'll come through appropriately. Now you can also customize those, but let's also just add an image here to the drop zone. So I'm just going to go back there. I'll use this same clip and apply it. Then we can see that we can turn off the back panel if we want, but it actually kind of looks nice here. Again, like the Instagram post, you can also turn off that button click. So if you want to turn it off now, it's just going to stay on follow the whole time. If you don't want that action, you can totally do that. We can also change the custom color. So there we have a button in a different gradient mode. And here's all the text panels. All right, so again, let's just select all of this and delete as we move further along into our infographics. And for this, what I'm going to do is to bring this image back into the timeline, just to put it underneath, because there's a couple of useful features that the infographics have that I need some footage underneath to use. So I'll just scale that up so it goes all the way to a 16:9 aspect ratio. Then I'll go back into titles and we will pick out one of the infographics. Which one? Let's choose this one over here. Alright, so automatically what you'll see is that it comes on screen like that, and we're going to mess around with those settings first, and that's sort of the background. So you can see here that we have these settings called footage move in and footage move out, and what that pertains to is the background footage. So let's say for footage move in, and that's the initial animation, we're going to make that move up. So now once the title comes in, you'll see that the footage moves up and out of the way so that the infographic comes into screen. Now we can also change direction on that. Let's say that we wanted the infographic to slide into the left and the footage to slide out to the left. All we have to do is for animation in, we can choose move left, and then for footage move in, we can just choose left. So that's an easy way to add a bit of style to it. Then you can also, if you want, you can, let me just turn footage move into none. And I'm going to turn off the background, because what you can also do is use the footage that you have of your background, but blur out the footage and desaturate it so that you can sort of notice your infographic above it. And then I'll also decrease the contrast of that a bit so you can see this a bit more. And then I'll go into the button, or rather the text, because right now that is quite... In fact, it actually works out quite nicely, but you can change all the colors if you want to make it a little bit clearer. Over here, for example, here's the number, so we can change number 1 color to be, let's make it a red. Color 2, we can make that sort of like also a red. Then you have your thousands separated, that you'll see just separates the thousands up. You can change all of your text. You can take off your text just by clicking on the check mark. And also the heading, you can get rid of that. So you can really make the title, or rather the infographics, as minimal as you need them to be. So with version 6, we've added 60 new infographics. Really quite excited by the possibilities that it adds to editors' workflows. Alright, so now we're going to go into the devices. Again, similarly to the infographics, I believe that there are 60 scenes here. So let's just bring in this title, and I'm going to just delete the infographic. So here is our phone. Very cool. Alright, so importantly with the phone, or rather all of the device scenes except for the headphones, because you're going to be matching footage to a 3D render, your scene needs to be 30 frames a second. It's not too hard. Just remember when you go File, New Project, just to make sure that your video is set to a 30p frame rate. And that way, when you bring in your footage, I'm just going to bring in something right. In fact, I'm just going to use this same clip over here. Then I'm going to scale this up and pan it across. Now what you'll see is that frame by frame the footage does match up with the 3D render. So there is two different phones you can choose from. You've got the iPhone as well as the Pixel. You can see if I go onto like a sort of side there, you can see the details are coming through, but you can blow those all the way out if you just wanted it to be one color without any contrast. Then I'm going to change the color of the phone. I'll make this a green phone for absolutely no reason whatsoever. That kind of looks nice though with the very dark blue in the background. Then we'll go to background settings. You can choose a flat background if you want to. You can, where do we change the scene shadows over here? So you can see underneath it, it gets multiplied. That's why it sort of darkens the scene so much. But you can take those off completely if you want to. You can also take off the custom background. So if you want it to be above your footage, you can do that. Panel opacity, that's just the text. And then the particles, they've already been taken off because we've taken off the background. And then here is our text. Also a check control to turn off the text if you want to do that. So now what we have is just the phone coming in. So this would be quite nice, especially if you're trying to demonstrate something. You could bring up your titles one by one and change your footage accordingly on the phone. You can also just extend it out as long as you want if you're doing that, and it will remain on the right hand side. I'll also just show you one of the headphones just to mess around a little bit more with the devices. Let's choose headphones 1. So this plays back a little bit slow because it's just rendering. But let's find the color and the details. So you can see we can also blow these out completely, but it's quite nice having the difference there. Here what I'm going to do is actually combine two completely different colors. So now we've got a nice red, and maybe make this a little bit brighter as well, but a blue bright. So that's that's also kind of cool, but let's keep it with this look. That looks quite nice. Scene shadows, just like before, you can see the shadows over there in the background. You can also change that color if you want it to be blue. You can do so. Background, you can change it to flat if you want, but I actually quite like the shape behind it. And then you can change the colors of that. So let's make it a red on red, and then the sphere color, change that to a purple. And the inner shadow, that's that over here, we can I guess make that whatever we want, yellow maybe. Let's just keep it like that. Change the sphere's opacity and the colors, the shape blur, you can change that however you want. Alright, so I'll delete all of that. And the last thing we have is the shape accent. So maybe this is kind of cool to use with a device. So let me bring one of these in here. So now I've got the watch on screen. I'm just going to move in here and I'll select the footage, go back here. Let's use this one and I'll apply the clip. And then obviously just scale that up because it's a bit small. And now what I'm going to do is go back into titles and I will use the arrows. And I'll bring it on screen here. So let's see, those are playing right on top of it. You can't really notice it right now. Let me go Command minus just to bring it out. I'll select the watch and extend it out. And then what I'm going to do is to bring it across over here. I'm going to go and rotate this. So I'll move it across like that. So maybe I'll make 2 of these. And I quite like the white. So I'm going to leave it, although we could change it to gradient. No, let's keep it at a solid. And then I'll copy this and select my point over here and then paste it. And then I'll just rotate it from this point. So now we've got 2 extra accents. Just an element to add to our screen. Alright, and finally we're going to be looking at the transitions collection. So as you can see on screen here, I've just brought up a couple of images into the timeline. You obviously can use your footage. I'm just going to use images as it's easier for me to just source them. So I'm going to hit Command plus just to zoom in here. And here is the FCP transitions collection broken down into the various different categories. So we'll start out with the basic shapes, and we will just use 25. Now, these obviously have a lot more limited settings compared to the titles. I mean, obviously you don't actually have to change any text with the transitions now. So we can see that on the right-hand side here in our transition settings, that most of it is just color settings. So you can see here we can change that to the gradient and also just change the color settings according to our parameters that we desire. And then you do have a few extra controls for each one. So for example, over here, you can just switch that to having a single line, and you also have the ability to switch the direction. And you can also change the movement. So if I just play that right now, you'll see that the footage moves in with the transition, but you can turn that off if you just want it to be a flat wipe into the next transition. What you might also want to do is to slow it down, because I don't know, I personally think that this one's a little bit fast on these two scenes here. So you can just click on your transition and just to drag it out. So now we've got a much slower transition into our next footage. That looks great. Okay, let's move along into the next category, and that is into the color shapes. And these are obviously quite similar. The only difference now is that you have a sort of like multiply layer. As you can see over here, there's like a color effect on top. You can see here the blending mode is set to multiply. Because of that, you can actually change it to whatever you might want to do. So let's say you wanted to use overlay. Sorry, that's actually one of the earlier colors over here. So that was originally set to multiply, now it's set to overlay. We can change that to color burn, and you can just sort of chop and change between these until you find something that you like. So let's just try it at linear light. That looks pretty cool. And I'll change the color settings here to maybe a pink and a green. We can also change the scale. So you can see over here, this is scaled to 125. We can scale that bigger or smaller. Obviously you don't want to make it too small, otherwise the footage will just come into your screen there. So let's make it about 197. Then for the second footage, I am going to add a bit more blur to it. So you can see the blur is only set to 4. I'm going to blur that out a lot stronger, and I will scale it down slightly. And then I will change to, let's try a linear dodge. That looks kind of nice and bright. So let's see how the transition looks now. This one's also a bit fast, so Command plus zoom in. And just click and extend it out to 2 seconds long. Simple as that. We've got our new transition into our second scene. Alright, cool. So those are the two sort of color shape collections. Let's take a look at the glitch transitions. So we'll just drag number 1 on top of it. Now this one, what you'll notice is that there are actually no settings that you can change, but what you can do is obviously still lengthen and shorten the transition according to your timing that you want to add. Let's play it back and see what it looks like. So it's really quite as simple as that. You just drag and drop it on, and you've got the transition into the next scene here. I'll show you what I mean. We can also extend it out. Then just play that back, and the transition lasts slightly longer than before. Let's try another one. Let's try number 4. Hit playback, and we've got a nice transition into the next scene. Okay, cool. Let's carry along. Now let's try out the grids, and let's just try short vertical here. So immediately what you'll see is that the footage is over there, and we are surrounded by all these drop zones as well as different color blocks. And what we can do is to set up those drop zones. So if we just select the drop zones and then select the images, and a shortcut here is you don't actually have to apply a clip for each one. You can click on each drop zone and set them up, and right at the end of that, then you can click apply clip. So this, I think, is the last one. I'll just use these two and apply. So now we've got all our clips in place. Then we can also go up here. We can change the colors to not have those gradients. We can just have them be flat, but I quite like them. You can also change the level of those gradients and also the direction. So if we, instead of wanting it to go up, we can go down. Then you can change all the different colors according to the palette you'll be using. I'm going to go with a yellow and orange version of this title here. So let's just find a various different colors in that palette range. I need one more orange. There we go. And let's take a look back at what we've got. Very cool. Alright, let's move along to the next set of footage. I'm just going to move here in the timeline. And let's go down into the ink transitions. So drop that on, and you can see that the next footage is already appearing underneath. Here you do have two settings. You can just flip and flop it. What that means is to flip it is to swap it left to right, and flop is to swap up and down. Let me try another one here. Let's take off this one, and this time we will bring on number 6. Yeah, so those are quite straightforward. And very similarly in terms of being straightforward is the paintbrush strokes, because they work in quite a similar way. They use a layer mask to mask out the top layer from the bottom. So just playing that back, that one's a little bit fast. We can actually also just slow that down to 1 second and 20 split seconds. And then it looks like that. Okay, cool. And then we have the slice transitions, I believe is next. Yeah, okay, slice transitions. Let's choose the block shift. Yeah, that looks quite nice. So that shifts in nicely. It's very subtle and smooth, and also pretty quick. And you can see over here the only control that you have is the drop shadow. So you can see over here in particular that adding and taking that off adds the subtle drop shadow. It's not as noticeable as on a couple of the others. So let me find another one. Here, chase lines up. This one will show it a lot better. You can see there's a lot more apparent of a drop shadow. So yeah, the slice ones are also quite simple in terms of just getting them straight on there, and they work pretty quickly. And then last is the zoom transitions. So let's just move along here, and let's go for beam in. Take a look at what that looks like. So that looks very cool. Alright, cool. Let's just try one more zoom transition. Let's go with scramble left. Alright guys, I hope that has given you a good insight into how much easier your editing experience can be using the collection. There's a whole lot more information and examples at the link in the description. And if you have any questions, please shoot them below in the comments section and I'll be sure to follow up. If you're a regular Final Cut Pro user, also be sure to subscribe to the channel as we regularly bring out tutorials to further improve your workflow. Happy editing, and I'll catch you soon.